morning again. So today's talk is about the divine puzzle and our individuated piece of the divine puzzle. How many people like puzzles? The rest of you can't stand puzzles. That's okay. See, here's the thing about puzzles. There's all these pieces. And imagine trying to go through life as if life was a puzzle and the image side of the puzzle pieces were all down and you're looking at cardboard. How many feel like that's the way life shows up sometimes? I know, right? And so here's the thing. They're all still there. Our job is to turn all the pieces over and start to look at what's shaping up. And eventually we get to put the puzzle together. But what's your mentality when you're putting the puzzle together? Got to have some patience. Got to have some trust that things are going to fall into place. Because let's face it, even if you're like putting a piece in and you can kind of get an idea based on the image, this is kind of where this piece goes, but there's so many pieces that look almost exactly alike, but they only fit in one special place. It's a challenge sometimes to be patient. It's a challenge sometimes to have that perspective, that it's a process. It's all a process. Imagine treating life like a puzzle. This whole process of getting this talk together was a jumble. My last couple of weeks has been kind of crazy. Was going to have my sweetheart come in from Southern California. We live 800 miles apart, but the connection is such that it doesn't really matter. She came into Albuquerque, was there for a few days, and realized we get a phone call about day 3, day 4, her sister's cancer has recurred. So we hop in the car, just throw everything into the car, we go back. And meanwhile, I'm due to speak that Sunday, which was last Sunday, in Medford, Oregon, at the Center for Spiritual Living / Unity Congregation. They kind of merged. And I'm speaking there last Sunday. Meanwhile, I've got to get back here this Sunday. Well, she gets in, or she's actually on her way to come and see me in Albuquerque. Her car breaks down. So she gets it going again. I come and meet her halfway, and I end up putting about 500 miles in that day. She puts in 800 miles that day. We get her car in my mechanic shop. We hop in my car to go back to California. We get up the next morning, and there are 7 warning lights in my car. 7. I didn't even know I had 7 warning lights in my car. So I get her car is at my mechanic. My car is at her mechanic. He can't even unravel all the codes. We go to the dealer, and the next morning, everything's fine. It was a simple brake switch. But you know what kind of panic we could have been in? And, oh, by the way, this was still going a mile a second trying to figure it all out. Because what's the brain's job? The brain's job is to figure it all out, to have certainty, to make sure that all the little pieces come together. Talk about an illusion. It's a joke, right? I mean, I'll just give you an example. There was no way we could ever manage all of that. Meanwhile, it turns out her car wasn't a big deal. My mechanic fixed it. But we were in California. She couldn't come back to get her car. Now she's taking care of her sister, who's in the hospital, sharing that job with the third sister. And she's trying to manage all of those pieces and going through the fact that her big sister is in trouble. She's going to be okay. She's got a really good prognosis. They're working on it. But how do you manage all of that, right? Meanwhile, my car, I had no idea what was going to go on with the 7 warning lights. They fixed it in a matter of a couple of hours. It was a brake switch. But it had all these other lights go off, which is kind of scary. But my brain is trying to figure out what all these warning lights are, what they could possibly mean. How am I going to get her car back from Albuquerque to Southern California? The whole thing was a mess. Oh, and by the way, I've got to drive up to Medford, Oregon, which is 800 miles, and then 800 miles back to her in Southern California, and then 800 miles back here in time to be able to speak here. This is trying to figure out all of that. This is trying to manage all of the details. But guess what? You're not your brain moving around 1,000,000 miles an hour trying to manage all the details. Who you really are, what you really are, is the noticer of that. And while your brain is moving 1,000 miles an hour, the real you, as I call it in my book, is here noticing the brain moving 1,000 miles an hour, while the real you is in stillness. Now, what difference does that make? Stillness is important. How do we get there? Well, first let me back up a little bit. Where's God? We've had this conversation before if you've heard me talk. Where's God? In here. Where else? Everywhere. I love New Thought congregations. Is there anywhere God's not? Okay, so if God's everywhere in everything, even beyond time and space, where does God have to go? Nowhere, because God's already everywhere. Therefore, God must be operating in stillness. So how do we get to that stillness? By noticing what's not still. It's counterintuitive. How do we get to peace, to quiet, to silence? By noticing the noise. When we step back from the stuff of the day, we can ground ourselves in this other place. That's the key to the whole game. When we just did the meditation and you were in your chair and yet suddenly you could expand your awareness beyond you into the room, to the building, to the property. You could go out forever from there. But that is what you are. You are awareness being aware of itself as such. And what part of you is expanding beyond your physical body? Not your body. Okay? There's a part of you that you can be aware of that is your essence, that is your soul. Now I'm going to give you some proof about that we are one with God. How many people know the atom? Some of you may have heard me talk about this too. You've seen the atom in the 8th grade science picture in Louisiana. In Louisiana, where I grew up, it was like high school. But everywhere else in the world is probably grade school, middle school. You've got this picture of an atom, and it's got the protons and neutrons in the middle, and you've got electrons orbiting around the nucleus, right? Well, everyone's seen that picture, but not many folks realize that picture is not drawn anywhere near to scale. If you were to draw that out to scale, if you were to magnify that atom to the point that the protons and neutrons were about the size of a marble, a little glass marble we'd play with as kids. I don't know if kids do that anymore. I guess now they watch a video game with marbles. I'm not sure. But imagine the protons and neutrons are the size of a marble. The first orbiting electron would be 10 miles away from the marble. And these electrons are grouped by distance, called shells, like seashells. The next group of electrons would be at the moon, 250,000 miles, 31 Earth diameters away from the marble moon. It gets crazier. The next shell would be at Jupiter, which is farther away from us than we are from the sun. Marble Jupiter. Literally astronomical distances, okay? Now, here's the wildest part of all. This stuff is being held in place. How are all of these pieces of an atom being held in place? By huge amounts of electromagnetic energy. In just amazing amounts of energy. You could power a city with that energy. That's atomic power. Or you could blow a city up with that energy. That's atomic weapons. The point is this almost infinite supply of energy in every single atom. I will assert that God, which is like the divine energy source of all the energy in the universe, is sourcing the energy in the atom. If the atom is mostly empty space, and that empty space is mostly divine energy, you are literally made of mostly God stuff. Mostly God stuff. That's why we can effortlessly expand our awareness. How many times have you reached to pick up a phone to call a friend or a relative and the phone rings? They were thinking about you, you were thinking about them. How is that possible? It's not our brain. It's our mind joining with divine mind in the oneness that we're all swimming around in that allows us to connect that way. This is going to try and micromanage that? No way. How did I get here today? You think I could have managed my girlfriend's car breaking down, my car breaking down, her sister in the hospital? And there's so much more to what's going on in her life right now that all came out of nowhere in the last week and a half. It's crazy making. I'm not going to go into all of that. but just know that she's going through a lot, and we're sending good vibe out to her every day and her family. Imagine what it took for you guys to be here every day. Sure, you walked into the building. No. How many, all the other little teeny tiny details? Your car had to start, you had to have breakfast, you had to have food in the fridge. There's all these details that have to get managed just for you to be here. Think of someone you know and love. Pick a person. You got that person in your head? Now think about how you met. What were the odds of you meeting that person that way that day? If you turn left, it's totally different than if you turn right, going out of the parking lot. So many details. I thought about my parents meeting in college. My dad was in law school. My mom was coming in as an undergraduate. They met at a fraternity or sorority event or something, because that's the way people kind of got together back then. If they hadn't hit it off, they wouldn't be together. I wouldn't be here. If their parents hadn't come together, each of their parents, each of them wouldn't be here and they wouldn't have gotten together. The odds are beyond astronomical. So this wants to manage that level of detail? We can think we can, but what's doing the thinking? The same thing that's trying to figure it out. This is always in the way. I'm not saying you don't need your brain. You need your brain. I had to figure out where, exit 276 coming in from Albuquerque today and, go down the road 11 and a half miles, and then I turn onto the little road, and then I get to Unity Way, and, oh, here I am. I need my brain for that. But there's no way your brain can ever manage all the little details every day. Today, I had all of these notes that I had prepared for today. And then I realized this is way too much. So I tried to pare it down. It's like, no, this is still not really enough. I need to expand it again. It was like the thought accordion. It's like, do I shrink it? Do I expand it? How do I manage all of this? It takes perspective. But what's perspective? Perspective is when you rise above the situation and you look around at all the details. Oh, okay, to get from here to there, I got to go through this, over this, under that, and I get to where I want to be. But without that perspective, I could go into overwhelm. If you go into overwhelm, how many people have been in overwhelm? Okay, how many people have been in overwhelm lately? A few, several, right? Here's the thing. What is overwhelm? What overwhelm is your brain feeling like it's unable to manage all the detail, right? But you can't manage all the detail. I'm talking to Karen on the way, and she says, my email is out of control. She's so busy. She's got family meetings. She's got business meetings. She's like the events and logistics coordinator at UNM. She's got all this stuff she's doing. And then, there's her dad. I mean, it's incredible, all the stuff she does. And, oh, by the way, emails still need to get answered. How many people have more than 100 emails in their inbox that they haven't gotten to yet? How many people are over 1,000? Right? We got some hands, right? You can't manage it all. But what you can manage is this. You can't get it to stop, at least I can't. I'm ADHD. But my ADHD that drove everyone around me crazy for so long is what enables me to get all my stuff done every day now. This brain that never stopped is now able to put together all of the pieces of my life that got me to here. If you can stop back and bring that perspective and look at all of the different pieces of your life that had to come together for you to just be who you're being in the world, it's pretty miraculous. I mean, I look at my own journey. I was in the audio business. Before that, I was in public recreation. I have a master's degree in outdoor recreation. It's all about peak experience and helping people get more out of life. Couldn't make a living doing that, so I went back into the hi-fi business. But then it was all about peak experience through music and having music move people, move their souls. Then the economy cratered back in 08, 09, and I went to doing healing work, which I'd been doing since downloads in June of 1984. How do you put all of that together, right? It's kind of weird. So I started doing healing and energy work. That evolved into something I realized was sort of a formulaic approach happening. So I thought, if it's a formula, I can teach it. So I spent all of 2013 receiving and downloading what's now a 4-part healers class. I call it my level 1 class, 4 parts. The second part is how to do the connection piece, how to connect at soul level. And I realized it could be its own thing. So I called it Soul Connection Workshop. Then I called it Access the Real You Workshop, because what you're really trying to do is access the real you, then the capital I, eye contact, so that I can make eye contact and contact each of you in your capital I space. And that's what I teach, by the way. There's a workshop today that, I don't know, didn't get mentioned because there's so many pieces that didn't get managed here and everywhere else, kind of what's going on in the world. We're going to have a workshop afterward. Love donation only. Love donation meaning it can be anything from I bring you some love to $1 million. I'll be real happy with anything along that timeline. Everyone who does the workshop is going to get a book. It's a pretty darn good book. It took me 7 years to finally put it together, about 1.5 years to actually write it. But what it's all about is noticing that you can notice what you're noticing. Because in the noticer place, you drop into the stillness where all the good stuff comes, where it comes in and comes through. And that which can come through you as you for everyone you're meant to touch happens. By the way, that is your piece of the puzzle. Not trying to figure it out, but just to be you as you can be every moment of every day, of every week, of every month, of every year, of every decade. You're here. And that changes a lot. Here I am speaking to you about principles that are in a book I wrote. And the book came from the opening conversation of the workshop. Everything's all connected. But until you walk the walk that's yours to walk and no one else's, you may have some folks walking with you, but ultimately your walk is your walk. But if you can step back and go back and notice all of the little pieces that came together, you'll start to see common threads in all of it. Like for me, it's serving the planet, speaking to people. I've been a trainer. I've been a sales guy. I do healing and energy work. I speak to people. I do professional speaking. It's all me being me. But I had no idea how this was all going to go down today. I took notes. I wrote notes. By the way, in the back of the sanctuary, I have notes of today. So for those of you who've been trying to write all of this down, just forget it. Pick up the notes on your way out and then read it. And if it seems to be a bit jumbled and a bit different than today's talk, welcome to my world the last week and a half. But the point is, you are not just some body in a body. You're a soul in a body. You are an eternal spiritual being who can notice what's going on in your brain. You can notice what's going on in your body. You can notice what's going on in your life circumstances. And the day you die, that noticer is going to be noticing a body on the ground or the hospital bed or wherever it is when your body ceases to function and transitions out. How do we touch someone on the other side of the veil? We can. How do we communicate and feel each other? Look into the eyes of someone next to you right now. Go ahead and do that. Notice what happens when you do that. You can touch people, right? You can frighten people if they're not ready for that. Okay? The point is, we connect, and we can connect. The workshop that I'm doing afterward is all about how to connect in that Namaste place. And here's the thing. It's like the divine light in me can see and bear witness to the divine light in you. We know that expression. What not a lot of people talk about is that if I'm not in that divine light place of myself and my capital S self, I can't see that divine light in someone else. What I've never heard anyone else talk about is if I'm in that place and I make eye contact with you, I'm going to catalyze, I'm going to awaken that light in you whether you are ready for that or not. And given that as a possibility, what my workshop is all about is helping us to connect in that place beyond the brain-generated division. in a place of oneness, in a place of connectedness, in a place where we can come together to work on solutions to help the planet, which is inherently divided. Why is that? This thing operates like a hard drive. It separates everything from everything else. But in doing so, it separates us from each other. It separates us from our true nature. It allows us to start to label and categorize and separate each of us from everything else and from divine spirit. Look around. Look around the planet and you can see the results of what happens if we let that go unchecked. But how do we get past it? You can't stop your brains. You can't stop the inherent divisiveness of your own brain. But you can rise above it. You can transcend it. Then the brain can do whatever it wants to do, but you're not your brain. You're the noticer of it. So how do you do that? You practice. How many people know the term myelination? You know myelination? All right, so imagine I've got these strings of nerve cells going down my body. There's the nerve cell. Around the nerve cells connected is called a myelin sheath. Okay? In between those are glial cells. But the point is, if I do something repetitively, like a tennis forehand, or stirring eggs, or making an omelet, or whatever, the more times I do that, the more I groove in that process. You can groove in movements. You can groove in speed reading. You can groove in anything. You can also groove in thought patterns. What is depression? Chronic depression is myelinated depression thought. You ever seen those people who are so happy you just want to slap them? Those people have myelinated happy thoughts. But it takes a while. You ever heard the thing, it takes 21 days to form a new habit? That's why it physiologically happens. It takes 21 days to form a new thought pattern, to form a new behavior, to myelinate the process. It takes practice. So whatever you want to shift, whatever you want to see change in your life, know that this is not going to be able to manage all the details. It's okay. You're not this. You're the noticer of that. And you can ground yourself in that noticer place and practice this new way, whatever that new way, new thing, new improvement, new step in your evolution might be. I went from audio to doing healing work, to doing a class, to doing a workshop, to opening the workshop with a conversation that's now a book. How many people know Bruce Lipton? Okay. I'll tear up about this one. I met his publicist 10 years ago. And he and I started working together about 6 months ago, doing some other stuff with another project. I'd introduced him to a friend of mine because I thought, this guy knows how to bring people together. So I've been doing this thing on Wednesday nights called Empath X. Go to empathx.org. We're talking about life and spirituality and the nature of being every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock, 6 to 7 Mountain Time. And it's pretty cool. So Doug is on there, and this guy Jeremy Koster's on there. I started hopping in, and now Doug and Jeremy and I are doing a rotation. Doug liked what I was doing so much, hearing about my book and everything. He's now coaching me to bring my book to the world and to bring this message to the world. Was that going to happen a year ago? I don't think so. Could I have ever predicted that? I don't think so. Could I have ever have managed all the details to make that happen? I don't think so. But what's doing the thinking? This will never have all of the solutions. But in walking your walk that is yours to walk, you'll pick up pieces along the way that when you start to put them all together, you got the puzzle. But it takes a while. It takes patience and perspective. It takes faith. And what is faith but trust? Trust is just trusting that it's going to be okay. That takes some habituated thought too. To trust and get used to trusting. You can myelinate trust, just like you can myelinate fear or happiness. But practice picking up the pieces along the way that fit you. Next thing you know, you got a life that's evolved into something that really serves humanity in the way that's yours. And guess what? If that's the case, who do you have to be? Just you. When I do counseling and guidance work with people, it's all about helping them come to know who they really are, why they really are, and to support them in walking the walk that's theirs, so that all any of us have to do is be who we already are. That's your piece of the puzzle. Be the divine spirit in the oneness that connects us all already anyway. And you'll make that contact, make the connections, and be the puzzle. Thanks.